right?
I know.
You have to even be up early tomorrow. So,
you heard it here first. The rabbi is on borrowed time. We're looking to have him for as long as we've got
I've got to
him.
be up early tomorrow.
He lives on the edge.
Everybody send your wishes to Rabbi. We'll have a eulogy in a week.
We're going to squeeze him over the next hour or so for all the juice that we can get.
It's going to be less than an hour. I'm cream crackered, right? I'm like that means very tired.
I mean, we could all carry on. It could be like the Weekend at Bernie's kind of version of YouTube stream.
Yeah, well, it normally is by the time we get to the second hour. That's not happening tonight. It's like I got to be up early, and I'm kind of jet lagged from putting our clocks forward. I've been like a zombie all day, right? And I've napped enough that I'm ready to go to bed.
Well, we'll do our best to wake you up.
Sorry?
We'll do our best to wake you up and keep you stimulated with some conversation and some of the usual kind of knob gags and childish stuff like that, as well as things that we might have spotted out there that other people haven't. So we've got some comments as well.
You want to know what was really weird?
It
was just Sabbath, right? And my son popped over, like I wasn't expecting. So him and his wife was there. And I'm watching him with his wife, and he's taking the piss and being naughty, exactly like I was, exactly like I used to be. It's like looking into a weird mirror of yourself through time and space. It's like, my God, he's doing exactly the same things. Talking of knob gags, right? Because
my kids pretend they haven't inherited my sense of humor, but they have. It is slowly rising to the surface, whether they're aware of it or not. Hello, lads, if you're watching. And there's Noel's on the mic as well. So I think we're limbered up and ready to go, everybody. There's a fair amount to talk about. Lots of laughs to be had at other people's expense, thankfully, Gary.
Yes, that's always the best. Do it at somebody else's expense.
Playful, never cruel, and always cheeky, never blue. Well, actually, no, we do go a bit blue on this show, don't we? But we'll see how.
There's no wrong with being blue the odd time, you know. I mean, let's be honest. You know, the last couple of days has been highly entertaining. I mean, Rabbi has literally just absolutely triggered the other side of the fandom.
I know.
I mean, to see that in real time has been absolutely the funniest fucking shit that I've seen. They're literally losing the plot. Yeah,
I know.
The writers, actors that are in this show are going around grooming and indoctrinating children into an ideology that's fucking dangerous and ruins their body. It does my head in. And boy, that big ass Therese. RTD is great. RTD is this. RTD is that. Shut up, man. We know you're only licking his arse because you're probably either fucking there or because he named a ramp after you. Who gives a fuck?
Oh, God.
Yeah, I'm telling the truth. He licks his arse. It's the only reason why he's actually coming out and saying, the ratings are great. Doctor Who is great. Nothing's great. The show is on its last fucking legs because of sellout fans like you. If you had spoke up in the position that you're in and told them, no, this is wrong, the show wouldn't be in the position that it's in today. Right? So that's where I stand on it. I'm sorry, Dan. I didn't mean to get you into trouble. I didn't actually even know you were alive. But as I said, I don't give a shit.
I know what you were speaking figuratively, though. I know that yourself and Tharis have got a kind of history. The Doctor Who community is full of lots of big characters with big opinions, and some of them make bigger swings than others at any given time, and they go for others, don't they? So I don't know what Tharis has said recently. I'm aware that he's very much treading a party line with everything to stay kind of seemingly on the right side. I mean, you know,
he likes that access, baby.
Everybody just go to Bulls Trek. What was it called? Bulls Trek Media. There's a stream on there that he's had to try, that he's attempted to have taken down multiple times.
Yeah,
you might find it very interesting. So I'll just leave you at that.
Because his opinions were exactly the opposite to what they are now. He's a little sellout like all of the fans in this fandom that have sold out. If you just want to know why the show has gone wrong, look at yourselves in the mirror. You are just as responsible. People like myself for the last few years have been willing to put their necks on the line and call it all out. And all we've ever gotten for it is abuse after abuse after abuse. And I'm still getting it today. Over Jodie Whittaker.
I think that just to step in a moment, yourself, yourself and Bolstrek in particular, our friend Chris here, have been, and to a certain extent Gary Beekler as well, and others who've been making content for an extended period of time, have been kind of used as a bit of a stepping stone for other people when it suits them to step off and then to step on, and then to step off again. And sometimes the views carry on of each individual in a sort of parallel. And this needn't be about Doctor Who, but about other matters as well. But sometimes people who are in this space, just like in real life, do change their mind, change their way of thinking, or they simply, in the case of Tharis, for example, and Tom, if you are watching, he was very young when he started out on YouTube, and to be fair to him, lots of us change our minds about lots of topics as we get a bit older. And 7-8 years when you're 22, 23 is quite a long period of time. So I think that in all fairness, people can change their mind. They can change their views about content that they've seen before, stuff that's going on in the present day. That being said, I think that
they haven't.
Trying to, as I understand it, though, severing friendships, though, and pretending that you didn't know someone when you didn't live stream with someone when you didn't attempt to curry favor with someone or a group of someone's when you really did. I think that I can't. You could put that down to youth as well, but I think that when it's all published and all out here for everybody to read and see, it's a bit of a harder sell. But it's not that we've all got long memories. It's just, well, hang on, the stuff is still here. If people, so I appreciate what you're saying. So I don't want to single out individuals.
No, I know, and I didn't actually mean to just single out one person, but he decided to get involved in the whole spat between me and that fucking gobshite that's on the show now, Royland Clark.
Ryland Clark. I never heard of him before, but I heard he's a big deal.
Oh yeah, I just wrote a comment. Dan will tell you. I just wrote a comment and saying all I just said was I asked a legit question of BBC, and I asked them were they going to be casting any straight people anymore for Doctor Who.
Well, it's a fair
it's
point.
the same problem that we see with a lot of the fandoms and even Star Trek, which isn't anywhere near as toxic as Doctor Who. They've got a similar problem because so many people involved with it are quite active and present on social media. And so therefore people feel like, well, it happened with the Ryland thing. You know, you and I, Ryland responded to me as well. Ryland is one of the biggest entertainment names in Britain. You guys won't know. He is huge, that man. He's never off the TV. So myself, and I was amazed that he replied to my, I wasn't starstruck in any way because I think I personally think he's a dick, so I wasn't starstruck by it, but it was surprising. But there's people who are young, I think younger people, who are very much captured by that sort of cult of celebrity and would be starstruck, would definitely be keen to be seen to be publicly appealing to those people and to falling into line.
We call
holding
them
a party line and to saying agreeable on the surface things.
We call those. I have another word for that, Dan. Posers. Being sort of the lightning rod for years now, probably still amongst some fans, one of the most hated people in Doctor Who fandom, who I've said this before and I've said it again, the video that made all this blow up, published in 2017 called Is Doctor Who a PR Disaster, where I actually advocated for a proper way of changing the gender of the Doctor and actually gave an example of a female actress who at that time, I don't anymore.
Critique.
Yeah, but
here's
the thing about Doctor Who fandom, and this, and I've said I noted this before all this, and I noted it now, and that's why I don't think this show deserves to exist anymore. It is the most toxic, elitist, robotic fan base I think of anything on the planet.
Got that word robotic? That is perfect.
Yep, and you can see it even on screen. It's like the same people that were there 20 years ago are there now, like almost all of them. It's like a constant, the chosen people, then you just keep moving it around, but 20 years later, it's still the same chosen people. You have the chosen fans who are, I think, mostly upper class, because the UK still has a class system. We don't.
They're all graduates, certainly.
Yeah, upper class, rich little snots, who even before this were the preferred people. And I could say this because 15, 16 years ago, I did have the biggest Doctor Who themed channel on YouTube. YouTube was a very small thing back then. How much attention do you think I actually got from the BBC? And I also had Amazon affiliate links, which I deleted years ago.
I bet you got a lot of attention, just nothing official.
They would not acknowledge it, and I know how much money I made off them because I used to get paid off those Amazon affiliate links. But because I wasn't part of the inner British cool club, and I wasn't British, I was Canadian, even though the show was created by a Canadian, but that's a whole other thing. So I get no attention. But then some of the chosen little snots whose mommy and daddy have connections, as soon as they start showing up on YouTube, they start making lists. I'm like, wait, I've been doing this for a decade. Okay. And
can I just say, so here's the problem that we have, right? I was talking about this earlier today about Doctor Who and the problems with it. And the biggest issue that we have right now with Doctor Who is there is too much fan involvement. It might have worked in 2005, bringing a fan in to write the show, say with Stephen Moffat, Chris Chibnall, it didn't work out. I'm actually getting sick and tired of people that are fans of this show, controlling this show and then controlling the narrative and then writing their own kind of fanfic, if that's what you want to call it.
In all honesty, my eyes have been open since I joined X, or as it was Twitter then. The pieces didn't fit together for me, and I only joined Twitter a few years ago, a lot later than everybody else. I could never figure out how it worked. And when I joined it and when I started to get my head into it, all the pieces started to drop into place. This skewed vision that the BBC in particular, not exclusively them, other broadcasters and program makers do too, this skewed vision that they have of their audience, their potential audience and their market virtually came 100%, not from any other platform, specifically from Twitter, from following trends on, because obviously they're all staffed by human beings just like us. And so they were on the same platforms as us. And so they were following those trends and chasing an argument that was all smoke and mirrors, about people pretending to be someone that they weren't and representing opinions and following that they didn't personally hold themselves, and following trends like sheep. And sort of chasing something that wasn't really there. And now we're a few years on. Another thing I've noticed, Chris, about people, the people who are sort of the posers, the show-offs, you've got some of the younger ones are still like that. But what I think has happened is that, and I don't think this has been necessarily since Musk took over that platform, but I think it's been the gradual change of the culture and people getting worn down, is some of the older ones. There's been several markers, several lines in the sand that have been crossed, and this isn't just Doctor Who. This is everything socially, where people have gone, okay, now it's gone too far, and obviously people have their lines set differently. But bit by bit, that's the thing with progressiveness. Enough is never enough, and so they'll always push it that bit further. So everybody's lines have been crossed, and so you've got a now situation where a lot of fans of Doctor Who in particular, but I think some Star Wars and Star Trek fans are there too, in that they've gone, okay, now enough is enough. There's people that I know who have always publicly been very keen and comfortable to stand with the other side of the aisle, if you like, and repeat the opinions that were fashionable when they were fashionable, but are now a lot more comfortable and more relaxed about either being more general and sort of playing in the grey areas a little, or some of them actually out and out admitting that they are either centrists or of the right wing, and not feeling like hunted animals anymore.
Well, and it didn't make sense to me until later, because sort of how I became the lightning rod out of nowhere at the time didn't make a lot of sense. But when you look at how Doctor Who fandom works and the elitist, cliquish nature of it, they announced the 13th Doctor in July. So at this point, part of, I think, how they wanted to publicize this at the time was they were looking for somebody to say something negative. and outside of like a few small things, nothing was said. And then and my video was made in September, so 2 months later, and there really hadn't been, because I think everybody was just terrified to say anything negative about it because they knew it was going to happen. So I made a video, is Doctor Who a PR disaster? None of them actually looked at the video. They didn't care. What they needed was an example of, this is the toxic backlash, because at that point they desperately wanted backlash, and because I was the first person to speak out. And it was also really, really strange how that video suddenly took off. It's as if, because it took off a month after I published it, and I'd done a few other videos since then. And I always kind of wondered, like, out of nowhere, like, and I remember I was at the job that I had at the time. The video had, you know, usually maybe a few hundred views by that point on YouTube was all I was getting, because I'd been shadow banned and I'd left for a while. But I remember being at work, and all of a sudden the video is going up by the thousands. So somebody actually amplified this video because they needed that lightning rod to prove their point, and that ended up being me. And you know, it is what it is. And yes, I'm Kermit, and now I'm Donkey Karen. So this show.
I have always meant to ask you about that and speak to you about it extensively, Chris. Even though I know you very well now, I didn't at the time. And it is a really interesting story. And as you say, you did become a sort of a lightning rod. And I think even now,
to this day, 8 years later.
Yeah,
like it's literally I actually find it kind of funny, because when everybody enters this what I will call the poser space, and they're looking for something, like, what do I have to do to show that I'm on side? Oh wait, yes, there's that Bullstrek character. I actually find it kind of funny, because I will have not posted anything in months, but somebody who's just desperate to prove they're cool with these losers will do an anti-Bullstrek video, and I'm kind of dumbfounded. I'm like, I haven't done anything in months. Is it
viewed of as prove your worth in the schoolyard by squaring up to the...
No, that's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is, Dan. These people, because it's like they never, like, we all know, like, the teenage mentality, the fear of...
Since we're going off topic again, Gary.
But these people never got out of it. Like, it's like you have a bunch of people that are stuck in it, and they're so desperate to prove. And the funniest things, when I would get these swarms on Twitter, and it was, you know, you could tell they planned this in advance. And, you know, you had to prove you were cool, so you had to come and annoy Bullstrek on Twitter. And you'd have all of them. And I'm just looking, I'm like, this is just so pathetic. And then you'd look at their profiles, and they all have the pronouns. They all have the rainbows. I'm like, you people are pathetic. This is...
it was crazy.
Well, I'd egg them on, too.
But it was absolutely crazy. I remember anybody then that associated with Bullstrek, right? And obviously, Bullstrek featured me in a couple of his streams, and then all of a sudden, I start getting the attentions of a certain fella in Barry Island at first. Then it was a fella called Tom Vance and the Nut My Doctor crew.
What happened to him? He vanished.
No, he vanished because he was exposed for
As I understand, the rumor was that he was visited by the officers of the law, by the boys and girls in blue.
Well, here's what's funny about it. I remember this would have been around 2000. I think no, it would have been around 2019. And you know, I've been doing YouTube for more than a decade by the time I got involved in the culture war. But I remember, you know, my old sort of clique, or I'm not going to use that word, my group on YouTube, which most of them are gone now, but it used to be Physical Media. And I remember I'm watching a live stream with somebody I used to associate with. And, you know, I had no association with the Doctor Who or anything like that. And in the middle of the stream, I don't think he actually even realized I was watching, because I had it on in the background while I was working. And he was getting messages because I'd been featured on a video of his, or I sent him some stuff years ago. And they were demanding that he cancel me on his show live because I had previously associated with them. This was just out of the blue. So it was crazy stuff like this. But this, Dan, we've almost gone off the rails. I'm going to shut up.
We have gone off the
rails. Yeah, that was my fault.
But I think it does. But I think it does go back to the initial point. And even though you mentioned one particular content creator, he was obviously that guy. who we all know. I think, and it's not just him. He's one of a crop of people who would have been at a very particular age when this platform exploded. And whilst their views are their views, and their evolution as creatives is a different topic. I think it's quite natural that the position that we were all in then, we were in adulthood, and so Tharis and others, there were several others who all at the same time attracted your attention, Noel, and yours, Chris. I'm sure it was. I don't think it was necessary to use your platforms, but I think it was because they felt a connection to what you were saying at the time. I think it came from a place of, okay, this could be where I fit in, and I think in some of us don't find where we fit in or where our views align until we're well into adulthood, in our 30s and 40s, or even older, Gary. But to do so publicly, that crop of people who feel minded to do this and put themselves out there, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for them, because I don't even know Tom that well, or knew Tom that well.
No, yeah.
I think they're trying to find their place in the world and where their views fit in. And when you're doing that publicly, at that time, it was kind of untested ground. And none of us knew what would happen. Like, I think that none of us knew what would happen, any of us, when we started our various podcasts, channels, forums, whatever it was that we did on the road that's taken us here. With me, it was just audio stuff. I never had any plans to be on video. And so I think that we've all been sort of feeling our way in the dark a little. But as adults, we were just more rounded, and our views had already become a little more curated by the time it all started for us, if you follow me. Got to talk bollocks, don't I? Okay, this is the
you don't. You actually, when you actually explain it that way, I can see where you're going with it, and it makes a lot of sense. What I will say though is while they were trying to find themselves, they did cause an awful lot of damage and harm to people in doing that. Like, we talk about Chris being this lightning rod, but
the trajectory of the things that individuals sometimes say, they can go all over the place, and we are all over the place. You think, well, hang on a minute, you were saying that a moment ago. So in all seriousness, where are you going with this in terms of your argument, your ideology, and what you would wish of either the broader culture or an individual series? I don't see much of what Tom Tharis covers now. I know that he's doing very, very well. I don't know if it's exclusively Doctor Who, whether he touches other things or not, but because there are people, like some of us, we like the Rabbi covers all manner of things. But so I think it can depend on all of that too.
How's Gary?
There was I just wanted to add really quickly that I think there's also the additional complication these days that is, as YouTube has grown exponentially, everybody, especially newer YouTubers, are trying to find some way to stand out, some way to get noticed, some way to be shocking. So it's hard to tell whether anybody you listen to like actually means what they're talking about, or if they're just trying to. Not everybody, but
I think people like that go to TikTok. Honestly,
okay,
and on YouTube, it appeals like the older wrinklies a little bit more.
It's a generational thing too, because we all know young people, and we all know that the attention span thing is a real thing. And unfortunately, the younger people, they can only, they like things in small bits, like their 1 minute or whatever it is on TikTok. I've never had a TikTok account, and I never will. And it's that's one of the reasons why movies are, there's many reasons why movies are dying, but a big thing is they don't appeal to younger demographics now, because they can't sit down and watch an hour and a half movie.
Bolts. I was thinking about that. Right, I was like, how could you use this mindless social media to be able to sell something? And I thought, you know what, they need to find a way of doing shorts in the same way they were like the every day you had the newspaper comic strips, right? You had like a bit, James Bond, right? You could maybe have like a 1 minute episode. Right, that goes out to
Yeah.
EO goes out daily, something like that.
Well,
We
the-
had
the
this
Sunday comics
conversation
we used to
before,
have.
remember?
I don't think they do it in newspapers anymore because newspapers are dead. But you used to have the comic
No, but I'm
strip.
saying like this.
Yeah.
That storytelling in little chunks is possible.
Well, there was a what was it? It was a failed app about late 2010s that tried doing that, presenting like professionally made content and small
Right.
chunks, but it failed. I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of funny. Like YouTube, I still like my favorite era of YouTube was the original era because I have been here since pretty much the beginning. You know, I like old YouTube where it wasn't about getting fame. It was a hobbyists.
Yeah.
But you know, back then you had to have a camcorder because smartphones weren't really a thing and the quality was awful. So you had to know how to shoot a video. You had to know how to edit it. You had to know how to upload it or transfer it to one of the like only 2 codecs YouTube would recognize at the time, and then literally you couldn't even tell if your video would load because back then YouTube didn't even have a progress bar. It was just it's either going to show up or it isn't. You couldn't reschedule it. Things would go live. That I like that YouTube where it's like a smaller thing, a hobbyist thing. Like when I started doing Doctor Who, wasn't because I wanted to get famous back in like 2008, 2009. Like I have these DVDs.
You wanted
I
to
wanted to show them
share.
off.
You wanted to share your. Well, I think I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again in a couple of weeks' time when we talk a bit about Doctor Who. But yours, when I first discovered YouTube and got access to it, like a lot of Doctor Who fans, just like when I first got onto the internet and got in front of Google, the very first thing I typed into the search bar on YouTube was Doctor Who, and a video by you going through your DVDs came up right away. So yours, Chris, was the very first voice that I ever heard on this platform.
Awesome.
There you go.
I'm actually Dan. I'm actually honored by that because you know you've become one hell of a YouTuber, an amazing voice for the Doctor Who community, which I no longer have a part of, but also what you're trying to do here. Which even though yes, people watching normally we don't discuss Doctor Who on this, but I think it's every second week we get completely derailed.
It was my fault this week.
Trying to do something different, but it's
these things do apply though externally. You know, I don't think Doctor Who. Obviously, each fan base has got its own sort of twist on, but I think the problem is. It is the same. I think there's a blueprint to it which matches every community. Exactly that I've come across, even the Bond people.
You know what the real problem is now? We're like 7 years in minimally.
What's that?
Doctor Who hasn't appealed for so long to normal people, right? So normal fans aren't being created. Weirdo ones are, but normal fans like normally.
It's worse than that, Rabbi. Like you just look at the history of my channel. I was as diehard a Doctor Who fan as you get, and even though I've never really collected action figures, that's about the only thing I didn't do. But I challenge anybody to find prior to 2017 anybody who was a bigger fan of the show than I was, and there are a lot of people where I can't stand the show. I love the classic series because it's far enough in the past. I will not watch any of the extras because I can't stand any of the people involved in it. But I think maybe it's nostalgia because I watched it decades ago in a completely different time. But for New Who, like if you look at my my RTD1, those first 4 series, the DVDs are beat to hell because they were probably the most watched pieces of physical media I ever had. It's done to me what it's done to a lot of people. Or not only are you not getting new fans. Not only
you're hemorrhaging
to do with it. You have people like me who were big fans who I can't stomach even looking at a photograph of Doctor Who 2005 to present.
Big fan with deep pockets.
Yeah,
that's sad, isn't it?
I mean, when I bear in mind what the rabbis just said about it's been the same for 7 or 8 years, and then connect that with what you said a moment ago, Chris, about you coming to YouTube. You know, you wanted to connect with other people, either other Doctor Who fans, other DVD collectors, and to just connect in that moment. And how you were saying, the rabbi there, it's got worse over the last 7 or 8 years. I think that's because no matter how the people who make these programs and movies, they're desperately trying to reach all this audience that's not out there. In the meantime, the fandoms have become so fractured, so tribal, that we've lost those connections. So now and again, something will happen that, like the Doctor Who watch-alongs and things like that, that brings people, because our natural instincts are actually to come together and to talk about this stuff. The BBC is the one that's dispersing it, or Paramount, or Disney, or anything like that. Our natural instinct is to connect with this, and I think that is why platforms like YouTube in particular have endured and grown. I think it's come with the growth of technology. Of course it has. But I think they've grown far, far greater because people can find that connection here that they can't get elsewhere. They can get that shared experience that the program makers aren't prepared to gift them anymore. They'd rather be seen as teachers, as leaders, and they've got it so wrong. You know, whereas we are all part of the community. The people in the chat watching now, no different to us on the panel, are they? No, you know, we're all of one.
That's what I mean. But Rabbi makes a very valid point, actually, on the whole. These shows or these IPs are not creating new fans. They're like, you've got us left in the background, and you've got maybe some fans of the 2005 era still hanging around. But there's no new fans created, because these newer type fans, they're not actually fans. They will move on to the next IP as soon as this one.
That is why they go and find Harry Potter. That is why they go and find anime or something like that.
Yeah.
That hasn't been, okay, it doesn't appeal to me personally, but it hasn't got the problems. It hasn't been infested in the same way. It hasn't been mispurposed and deliberately weaponized against anybody. I think there's a purity in it at its source, where it feels like it's just theirs. And when they meet people who are into that same thing, they get the connection that we used to have with that stuff. And there's nobody, no corporate entity or sanctioned body, institution like the BBC with their finger in it, telling them that it's wrong or trying to sort of mold it before their very eyes. It's theirs. It's something just for them that they can read under the covers or read in a bus shelter or in the refectory at college or something like that. People need that. People need to connect either on a very intimate level with the people in their day-to-day lives and on a greater scale as well somehow. And it applies the same digitally as it does IRL, in my view.
That's the thing, though. This is the difference between us fans and these newer type fans, is that no matter what the franchise is, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, it doesn't matter what it is. Our generation of fans have this emotional attachment to these characters because we've grown up with them. It's like, for example, when Mark Hamill came out a few weeks back and says, "Oh, Luke Skywalker is gay," and then all of
Mark Hamill recast Luke Skywalker,
right? But the thing about it is that you could see the real Star Wars fans come out and criticize. What are you talking about, Mark? He's not acting. And as I made the point earlier on my stream, this is a man that was going to Shaggy's sister in Star Wars, right? So he was far from being big gay, right? So even out. But that's the truth. That's the truth. He wanted to bang Princess Leia, right? Before he found out that Princess Leia was his sister. So there's no way that Luke Skywalker was gay. Everybody seems to be gay now, gay or queer or whatever it is they call it nowadays. Every character has to be that as well, and I don't get it, because what you're doing is you're basically disenfranchising the whole fucking fandom for who? For a few people that are not going to be emotionally invested like we've been for. Like, I'm 40 odd years of age. I've been invested in Doctor Who for almost, I'd say, 35. 36 years. I was a kid when I saw my first episode of Doctor Who. I remember it was Pyramids of Mars. I always say that I have a soft spot for that story. That was the very first Doctor Who story that I seen. Now, Peter Davison was my doctor, though, because he was on TV when I was a kid. But Pyramids of Mars was the first story that I actually saw, and I was hooked. And when I look now and I look at modern fandom now, I don't know what these companies are doing. He's already had a fandom there. You could have expanded it if you've done things properly, right? All we're asking is for, characters to be well developed, to have, decent stories. It doesn't matter what franchise it is, and we haven't been getting that for years.
You mentioned Mark Hamill earlier on, and I haven't heard what Mark said about that. But there's a prime example. As I was saying earlier on, I said Gary, that some of us are searching, are trying to find and curate our views, find out where we align, what our values are when we're in our teens, and we sort of get there, in fits and starts, don't we? And life can sometimes get in the way. But in the case of Mark Hamill, you've got a man who is now 70 years of age and still doesn't know, and still is running with a herd, is still desperate to appeal to whoever. Okay, you can see the man has got no head of his own. And he'll probably,
it's about relevance.
The sad fact of the matter is that Mark Hamill will probably, and I don't wish this on him, but he will likely go to his grave in that emotional state.
Yep.
Not have grown.
Okay, this is what we need to do: a pay-per-view special, right? Where Mark Hamill portrays Luke Skywalker one last time having rough, violent, gay sex with a large.
You can pay for that if you like. I won't.
Right? And let him commit to the bit then. Luke Skywalker's fucking gay. You be okay then. Let's see how easy that is. Right? Absolutely.
Well, on BBC One on a Sunday night.
I was about to say, I think Gary had something interesting to say, but we're not letting it.
No.
Okay,
I was.
Wait. You know what we can do? We can have a tent, right, with Luke Skywalker, with Mark Hamill's head sticking at the front, and whoever the big black guy is at the top, right? You don't actually have to see it, right? But just their heads. That's perfect.
Welcome to Rabbi. But one thing that I've been thinking as well, because there is a cultural shift now. I have always been a centrist, and I'm worried that it's going to shift too far in the other direction, because the opposite of wokeness is Christian propaganda, and we don't want that either. But I think one problem in having shifted so far to one side for about a decade now, or just a little bit under a decade, is certain groups were so overrepresented. And yes, the LGB whatever letters thing is one of them. And, a lot of them are normal people like us. We know a lot of them, but they're not the ones whose voices were heard for the past decade. And the problem is that you can almost tell when something was made in that era, which is coming to an end now, because you can see one of these individuals just for no reason whatsoever, just showing up. So the problem for those who are not, nuts, is that it's going to be the reverse problem, where it's going to be hard for them, maybe for a couple of years until things balance out again, to actually be legitimately represented. Because now, whenever one of them comes up, I'm talking about the various overrepresented groups, and there's several of them. It's going to be next to impossible for them to show up in anything without people questioning. Oh, okay, you checked a box. When, prior to 2015, we just didn't look that way. Exactly. So they've actually created a problem in trying to represent this group. They've actually, these various groups, they've created problems for these various groups, because overrepresentation means there's going to be a reverse. And unfortunately, the way I'm seeing culture shift right now, because I am a centrist, I have always been a centrist. I hate the far left and the far right equally. I am actually very concerned that we are going to see a pushback in the opposite direction towards Christian propaganda. If you don't know what that is, look at PureFlix, a Christian streaming service, and it's as bad as you think. That's right. What they want. They want PureFlix. So what...
a great deal of it I'm finding as well, Chris, and we see this in geek culture as well. There are several people who are purporting to be Christians too, where it's, for want of a better word, I don't like using the word grift, but it's
a poser. Dan, it's posing in the opposite direction, and I find, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to drag anybody out, but I know who the legitimate YouTubers are. And they're those that, kind of came up with the rest of us. Like I know my good friend Gary, Nerdrotic, he's as legit as they come, because we actually came up together simultaneously criticizing Doctor Who under great hatred from all levels. But the problem is, and there are several YouTubers that I have stopped following recently, because the goal for all of us was we didn't want this wokeness in there, but now it's like they're following a trend where all of a sudden you're Christian. Like, you were Christian before. Why are you Christian now?
Yeah.
We need, America. No, we don't want that. I'm like, yes, that's perfectly fine, but no, we don't want that
a performative
overrepresented either. We don't want the Christian right. We don't want evangelical nut jobs. We don't want it to see, like, give you an example. I like most of what Matt Walsh says. He's the only figure on Daily Wire I can stand. But you do not want to live in a world that Matt Walsh would want to live in if you actually listen to what he says. No. It's a Christian hellscape. And
he's got some very strange ideas.
I would say this. The coalition, like the MAGA coalition that exists today, is so broad. I don't see it really like collapsing that into that niche. I think, quite frankly, I think Christians will be happy to coexist without being attacked and like live and let live, right? That being said, I do think gay marriage is going bye-bye, right? I think gay marriage is
Rabbi, and I know and definitely, Rabbi, no offense, definitely to you, was intended with that there. But I think it's not so much like, if you are a legitimate Christian, it's about, I'd say, essentially being a good person. But what we're looking at right here, it's the same thing where people who didn't know what they were talking about, people that didn't actually represent it, took over the left, took over what we've now termed as woke, blew everything completely out of proportion, took over everything. There is a risk of that happening on the right, where it might not be the legitimate people, but again, the posers, those that don't actually understand what they're talking about, those that are with power that gravitate to something where they see it as popular. And then we see a reverse trend happen. What we need to happen, and I don't know if this will happen, is we need something to go back to what it was 2015 and earlier. Something from the center. I don't
the golden
want,
age.
Yeah.
2015 is the golden age, right? We didn't know how good. Well, I think we did. We didn't. We knew how great it was. Like, we couldn't believe how good things were going.
Yeah.
We could see the early signs on what direction it was going in, and it wasn't good. And by the way, I know there's a couple of Christians in the chat there. I'm a practicing Catholic, so but what I've seen in Hollywood and beyond is an attack on my faith and my religion. Exactly. And you see, the thing, Rabbi, is right. It will go to the other extreme, because you see it in everyday life, whether it's politics, whether it's TV. Religion is not immune to any of this, so it's all connected.
There are extremes of everything. It doesn't matter what. There's an extreme in gun culture. There could be an extreme in religion. There can be an extreme in what were originally legitimate leftist causes. Feminism was a legitimate cause, and then it went to the extreme. Have
you noticed that, Chris, the people that are claiming, and this is roundly, it's as if, I don't know whether it is to stand out when there's so much noise, but people's claims about their values, their beliefs, are very, very, not only very loud, but far more strident and set in stone than they ever seemed to be before. And it's as if they're going to be unmovable and absolutely everything, to the point where
lack confidence like they never did before. That's really why nobody really believes anything.
No, it's
they know they don't believe it.
We've lost, and this is an outcome of the social media age, which also exploded when real things ended. And it's young people will probably, you have no idea what it was like to live in the 90s or the 2000s before the age of social media, because it's been going on for so long. And there are, like I said, there are bad elements on both sides, and
Can you get TikTok on this shit?
You're all entitled. Everybody's entitled. Like, I'm a member of the United Church of Canada. I haven't been practicing in probably about 15 years, but I do believe, I'm not super devout, but I do believe in God. I believe in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But but I think there's a time and place for everything. Like, you want to make your leftist movie, okay, go make your leftist movie. You want to make your Christian movie, okay, that's fine. There's an audience for that. It's, like the Left Behind series is just an example I'm thinking of. I love the movie because Nicolas Cage doesn't care, and even when he doesn't care, it's hilarious. But, you can have your Christian movies as well. But the problem that we have is we have existing properties, Star Trek, Star Wars, Ghostbusters, basically everything except for Back to the Future at this point, which they were nonpartisan series. They were, I guess, a-religious, if you want to call it that. They may have their own religion. Yeah.
Everybody can sit and watch it, and everybody can like it up until 2017.
What's your perception of this statement that Isaiah has made in the live chat on YouTube? Tolerance and acceptance of the 90s has got us to this point and has kind of birthed wokeism.
I just got to participation trophies, right?
Actually,
that's where it went wrong.
I'll say, Isaiah, it's the argument is right. I think the time frame is wrong. What happened and this was by the mid 90s, because in 1990, especially if you were homosexual, is a very prejudiced time. I'd say 1995, or anybody who was old enough to remember, it's sort of that 95 to maybe around 2005 was that one era where I think the closest that we'll get to equality had been reached, to the point where it was largely a non-issue. In that era, we weren't, we'd had gay acceptance, and even though we make fun of Ellen now, I think it was 95 when Ellen came out as a gay character.
Yeah, it was a big deal at the time. I
remember. It had been normalized into society. I think, there was a lot of racial equality. Unlike Captain Sisko in 1993 became the first black captain, and none of us really questioned it. To be honest, I didn't even notice his color. We didn't really talk about these things. It wasn't
Captain Janeway, Voyager, a female captain as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
There was more said. There was more said about that, as I remember. The press used that, and they played on words a little, but there was no murmur about the casting of Avery Brooks as Sisko. And the stuff with Janeway in Britain certainly was.
They did comment on him being black.
No, there was not in any. Not in the British press. There was not a. I mean, Star Trek was lower profile here. I'll admit it.
Most of the profiles was this is the first black commander of
I think it was just.
He did the same way. The same with Janeway. I mean,
it was mentioned.
I remember because I was a fan of Voyager.
No, when Sisko, because they're in my basement now, but I kept all the clippings from everything from around then. At some point, I'll see if I can find them. But when DS9 came, it was largely just mentioned as a fact. It wasn't ideological. It's the first black captain.
Yeah.
But the focus was more on the show itself. There was concern around Janeway, but it didn't have to do with the female captain. It had to do with the original actress who was cast, Genevieve Bujold, who even before those god awful scenes came out, we'd seen scenes before. Nobody could see how this.
I tell you, good on them for recasting.
Yeah, they did. Right? They did panic. They panicked so much that the executives were actually watching every cut and every scene that Kate ended up doing because of the previous actress being absolutely bored. Have you ever seen the actual clips? I tell you, she would have been
because they viewed Voyager as the natural successor to the TNG show, which was the flagship show.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So this had to work.
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry, it's just my computer is actually acting weird tonight.
It's okay. Just got a slight delay now.
New computer. I've been saying that for years. But I think the concerns for Janeway, as soon as we saw her in the character, and I've said this many times, I'm not a fan of Voyager, but I think Kate Mulgrew and Janeway is one of the few strengths of that show. And I think as soon as we saw her in The Caretaker, I didn't like most of the characters, but I actually did like her. And I think that was, most people didn't have an issue. But again, when they portrayed Janeway, her gender rarely came up. I haven't watched most of them in years, but I think there's one episode where she tries to seduce a guy under trying to escape.
Counterpoint. It's one of the best episodes of the Voyager. So Counterpoint. It's the fella where a ship keeps getting boarded by because she enters a certain part of space that she's not supposed to. So there's a whole thing where you think your man is seducing her and getting the better of her, and then right at the end, there's that fucking twist where she gets him, and it's absolutely brilliant. But they never made a big deal, I have to say. The media might have, but them themselves never made a big deal of the fact the female captain. She actually, as an actress, I think she was perfect casting. I am a fan of Voyager. Obviously, Chris isn't. It's one of my favourite shows. It's up there. Part 1 and 2, I have to say, is boring. But he actually saves that episode because of her performance.
I liked Voyager, but in my opinion, I think the biggest problem with Voyager is that the premise really kind of demanded that it be a serialized show.
Yep.
And it was an episodic show like Next Gen.
Yeah.
And so they had to keep
they should have replaced like a Whoopney cell by the 3rd season.
I haven't got any Voyager pick. I haven't got any Voyager because the show has gone completely off the rails. I've got no Voyager pictures prepared. This is the only Trek one I've got to hand. So this will have to illustrate your point, Gary. Continue.
Yeah, Voyager should have had more scenes like this. I guess is what you're saying,
I think somebody did a count. I think Voyager had something like 24 shuttlecraft because they kept blowing.
Exactly, Chris. Yeah.
And see, Gary, here's. I think I've said this before. I say this all the time, but we got a 2-episode example of what Voyager should have been.
Year of Hell.
Year of Hell, which is
that was awesome.
That's what the show. That was your show.
Best episode.
Well, and Chris, that the original plans for that was going to be
a season arc.
A season arc, exactly.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, it was. That's why your man plays. That's why your man that plays the Chakotay has been very outspoken about Voyager. Future's End as well, part 1 and 2. They wanted to make that a season arc as well, but it never.
The partners were great. Like I'd say there's about a season worth of Voyager episodes that I like, but they're almost all 2-parters, and I can't remember what his name was now.
Hey, listen, from season 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Voyager is great Trek. Ignore the first 2 seasons, but season 3 it starts getting good, and then when they introduce 7 of 9, obviously they introduce 7 of 9 in season 4. Well, she gets introduced at the end of season 3, but then in season 4. But in fairness, when she joins the show, the character development for her and the Doctor is off the scale. They seem to actually forget that the rest of the crew is on the fucking ship, because that's Captain J actually stagnates. She never changes then. Our character never develops after that. But 7 of 9 and the Doctor's character development in that show is absolutely top notch. And I would have to actually say that the episodes that featured those 2 are probably some of the best Trek episodes that we have.
I would have to turn the sound down because that'll get in the way of me masturbating. I'm sorry.
Peter Harrington, I'm gonna just answer a quick question. Wasn't Kate Mulgrew's Columbo's wife? Yes, Mrs. Columbo only lasted for about half a season. The funny thing was Peter Falk was in his 50s and she was like 28 or 29.
Yeah, they changed the premise of that show like 3 times over 13 episodes, and they scrapped the whole Columbo's wife thing after like 4 episodes because it didn't fit.
But here's
got me all excited.
Dan's sitting there like, how did we end up talking about Voyager?
I don't know. I'm just lucky to be. I'm just lucky to be in your company, gentlemen.
I didn't understand what the Mrs. Columbo.
No.
Weird, though, like
somebody appears to have hit fast forward on Noel, but let's see if his signal's caught up yet. Noel, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, it's. Yeah.
Well, toward the end,
everybody seems to be buffing on my screen all the time. You're all buffing on my screen. I don't know what's wrong with the computer.
Let's pass it over to Gary for a second.
No, I was just going to say, like, toward the end of Voyager, they start throwing in goofy ideas, like the whole like Chakotay 7 relationship, which never worked.
That was a bad idea.
I mean, they did introduce what I thought was kind of a good idea with the Borg kids, but they just didn't do enough with them. I thought that was an okay idea.
And then they slaughtered them in Picard.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I remember when they revealed the cast for Voyager, in feeling that it was for the very first time, and I'd never felt this about any Trek series before, and I never felt that about Enterprise either. I remember looking at the cast and thinking, these characters, they look like they've been put together a little by committee. And sure enough, I don't believe the crew of Voyager ever truly gelled in the way that those on the previous series and Enterprise ever really did. And I don't know why that is.
Here's
the original premise, for example, for Tuvok was that he was a much older character, wasn't he, Gary, if I remember rightly?
Yeah. Oh, exactly right.
He was Janeway's tutor at the academy or something?
He was going to be a much older character, but I think they wanted to equalize the ages. The other problem I have, and I don't want to undercut Noel's being a fan of the show, because there's a lot about Voyager that I like too, but I always thought that it was a colossal mistake. They took the best thing about the premise of the show, which was the mixed crew of Starfleet and Maquis rebels, and they completely neuter it by the end of the pilot by having them, integrate in. And I thought that should have been the arc of the whole first season. Isn't it? Wait a minute, Rabbi. Is going head to head against the Maquis, and then the end of the first season concludes with them all deciding they need to come together and then go. The fact that they wrap all that up in 2 hours.
No, I agree with you, Gary. I always felt that way.
Broke the engineer's nose. Like, it was an early one.
Wait, which one?
There was one where it starts off with
B'Elanna Torres. She punches the.
Oh, that was the second episode.
I thought it was just okay, fine. It was early. Yeah, they did sort it out too quickly. I agree with you. But no, there was that great shot though in the pilot where Chakotay's like dive bombing his Maquis ship into someone.
That was
great. Kes not so much. Kes never works.
No, Kes didn't work, and neither did Neelix.
It's the Kes.
I like Tuvok.
The whole thing surrounding Kes is actually, if Jennifer Lien, it's actually a very sad story. If any of you know what happened,
it is.
Because they actually destroyed that poor girl, and she's had her life has been a train wreck ever since. So it's
because the guy that was playing Harry Kim was supposed to be getting kicked off the show. The guy that was playing Harry Kim.
Oh.
Well, here's the thing, Noel. I like what they did with Kes, and right before they got rid of her, they made her stop wearing that stupid wig. As soon as they let her use her normal hair, she started playing the character a little bit differently. I thought that actually worked, and then they got rid of her.
What they should have done with Kes, Chris, in my opinion, I think that because there was a couple episodes where it seemed like she was developing all these latent telepathic powers, they should have done more like that to distinguish her.
Where she like sets Tuvok's mind on
fire, and
right?
That episode where Harry gets killed, but basically they bring in a duplicate Harry. I think they were originally but you remember that episode where the ship splits and I think they really were going to get rid of him in that episode, but then they decided to keep him, and so
they couldn't get rid of him because he won. He was in this magazine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, he was like exactly. This magazine said he was the most handsome guy or something.
That's right.
Yeah. Although again, I don't care whatever the differences are. That they went from Kes to Seven of Nine. I'm like, that's just a big upgrade.
Yeah.
Well, I think the two characters would have worked well together, and I could not stand. Harry Kim was by far my least favorite character on that show, and I wish they would have turfed him because I think with Kes and 7 of 9. I think they could have done some interesting stuff there, especially, with Kes's powers developing. They could have worked that into the 7 of 9 story while she's trying to, figure out her whole.
Okay, but I just made my.
Remember, several characters on the show got promoted, but Harry Kim was never promoted in the show.
Well, that's because he
was never promoted in the show. He was the only character that didn't get promotion. 7 of 9 was promoted. Tom Paris was promoted. Even Tuvok was.
Well, 7 is now captain of the Enterprise.
And that wasn't even supposed to be Tom Paris. Initially, it was supposed to be Nick Locarno from the Next Gen episode.
Yeah, there was Gary. There was a legal thing with that, wasn't there?
Yeah,
the original writer didn't want, or something.
You're right, Chris. Yeah, that's right. The best character on Voyager was the Doctor. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
they're
going to ruin it on that next show.
The Doctor in 7 of 9 for me, and not because your woman was absolutely gorgeous looking, but she's a great actress. I mean
I'm still of the belief that they should Batgirl the upcoming Star Trek Starfleet Academy show.
Yeah,
but is anybody intrigued by the fact that they've got Robert Picardo back, or are they just using the poor guy and that character?
To legitimize it.
They're also going to emasculate him because this series is also going to be dated by the time it comes out, because it's right out of 2020. It's it's been in development for 8 years now since the show came back.
8 years.
Supposedly they're going to start filming season 2 at the end of the summer.
It's insane, but so you look at it, you go, how, like nobody wants this, right? Nobody wants the Tilly adventures, like no one ever wanted to see this.
What happened to that storyline? I mean, I didn't stay with Discovery to the end. Did they ever pick up on that story where Tilly was infected by a spore from that giant sort of creature that they used to use to power the spore dryer?
Oh, the tardigrade.
The tardigrade. Do you remember when it died? Did it just mean that she put on a few more stone? Because did they ever do anything with it?
I gave up on it.
I don't think they ever revisited that.
So I gave up after season 3. That's why, like, when we watched that god awful Section 31 movie, none of us could figure out the time frame until I did research. I'm like, oh, okay, so she actually came back during the seasons of Discovery that nobody watched. So that's why.
Okay, I'll say before we started, there's very, very good news, because to get an FCC license now, your company has to take apart any DEI policies. Right? They literally said, if you want a broadcast license, you have to work fast to dismantle your racist, bigoted DEI programs. Literally, that's how they said it. So they are going to have to backtrack, like Disney and ABC are under it.
Well, Rabbi, apparently that's the reason why season 3 of Strange New World is going to be slightly delayed. It was supposed to come out probably like the other 2 seasons, like around April or May, but they're going back for either re-editing or reshooting of season 3, already completed season, to remove a lot of,
Okay, you got to remove a lot of chicks. That's what you got to do to Strange New World. You got to get rid of that pilot. You got to get rid of the security officer. You got to get rid of Carol Kane, right?
They're insufferable. Leave Rebecca Remains famous. But I think the funny thing about Strange New Worlds, and that is the oddity, where we know that it had the potential, probably still has the potential to be a good show, because that first season, I will say it again, aside from those insufferable characters, was good.
I really enjoyed it.
They could undo season 2 and make it good. Like, it's Anson Mount, his insane political beliefs aside, is of the same caliber as the best captains we've had. I actually like the recast of Uhura because she isn't a Mary Sue.
I liked her as well in the end.
She really exceeded expectations.
Yeah, she did. I thought, oh no, here we go again.
She was very likable. The haircuts were so severe. I thought it was. I didn't understand why they'd given her that severe look, and I thought it would get in the way of the character. But to the testimony of the actress, she brought so much warmth to it. Yeah. But she's got great big tits as well, which always helps. She brought so much natural warmth to it that it really won me over. And although I'm sort of with Ian Diaz on Ethan Peck as Spock, I still don't quite get it.
What annoys me about this show, though, is that the first season started off with a lot of potential, as all you have said on the panel. So why did it, I can't understand how they managed to nail the ball for the second season. Do you know what I mean? They knew what worked and what was successful.
They did everything wrong. Again, there was too many women laughing in the show. I was like, I couldn't, when they're in their 10 forward, which they shouldn't have. Right? I think every episode they're all like howling with laughter while drinking.
Well, I hate it again. Also, he was angry because he had obviously been completely sidelined with Picard. And I think that was his revenge, because even the characters were all played differently. But one thing that actually won me over. There were a couple things in that first season. In the first episode, you actually have a very Star Trek-like speech given by Pike about, if two sides can't come to an end, you're doomed, which is where we're headed.
That was
also with
right.
Uhura, I think an excellent scene, which is something that we hadn't seen at that point, where not only is she not a Mary Sue, but she's completely unsure of whether or not she belongs here. And I think a brilliant scene was when Spock basically tells her, if you're not sure, 1,000 people want this job, so maybe you should look into something else. They're
exactly
around those lines. And it's like basically denouncing DEI right there. So I am curious what they'll do with Strange New Worlds, but I'm not holding my breath because I don't know if they'll ever be able to get over that musical episode, but time will see.
They did manage to bring it back a little.
MAGA stands now for Make Alex Go Away.
Somebody else. I got told the story.
Of people going away, I am going to have to climb the wooden hill to Bevershire. I got to get up early.
Here, apparently they're doing a Janeway series now. I know she was in that cartoon, which I loved. But apparently there's rumors that they're bringing her back.
You're right. There is.
The Prodigy series is quite well thought of for what it is. I've never seen it myself.
I watched every single episode, right? And I'm not normally into.
Hey, while this computer's not working, I'm going to say good night, everybody.
Good night,
Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for your company, mate. We're going to stay. Seeing as we keep losing Noel. Seeing as we've completely lost every topic I was going to cover on this edition of the show, we've already lost one panelist.
Let's go for it. Go for the topics now. Come on.
No. Let's stay. Because we've already been going for an hour and 5 minutes. So let's stay with Star Trek, because I did want to ask you, because this story broke a couple of days ago, and it's concerning Section 31, and because people are talking about it in the chat, and it's the actor Rob Kaczynski. Now, you guys, you probably know who he is, Noel, but the others may not have. Rob's started to speak really quite candidly about his time making that TV movie, the before and the after of it, and interactions that he's had with Alex Kurtzman, who for the time being is still leading Star Trek over at Paramount Secret Hideout, whatever you want to call it. And according to Rob, now Rob in Britain, he's a notoriously outspoken actor and his behaviour got him suspended from EastEnders multiple times. He was all over the tabloids, all that kind of thing, mainly because, and it's not that he was a bad lad as such, but he's the kind of bloke, he's like 40-odd, he says whatever he says, he likes a drink, likes a laugh, blah, blah, blah. And he's just a bit of an open book. He started talking about Star Trek, his time making that TV movie, and he quoted Alex Kurtzman specifically as having said that Star Trek was effectively either dead or dying. If anybody's to blame, strangely enough, it's Alex Kurtzman. I would have thought. But have any of you seen this interview that Rob has given?
No,
it's not. I think it was to Variety. But people have mentioned it in the live chat, and I thought, well, it could be something that's worth picking up on, because obviously, as you quite rightly say, Chris, there's 1-2 seasons of Star Trek Academy on the way. I know. So, but Kurtzman's the guy who's still leading that. Kurtzman will be the one out promoting that, and yet here he is behind closed doors saying, "Oh, Star Trek's dead."
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go on a Comic-Con and you tell people that Star Trek is to be used as a platform to push all of this bullshit, well, then of course your franchise is going to can. Alex Kurtzman is not a science fiction writer, right? He did Hawaii Five-0, the updated version of Hawaii Five-0, and it's a good show. It's actually, I would say, it's a top-tier show. He's great at writing crime, but when it comes to science fiction, he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. So he compensates, and he then pumps it full of his bullshit, his ideology, and all of this. If Star Trek is dead, it's because of Kurtzman himself. So I find that quite ironic that he's saying to an actor that he's brought in, "Oh, Star Trek is dead." Well, you're responsible. You're responsible for it. Because I could tell you now as a Star Trek fan, and I think some of us on this panel are, all we're just, look at the reason why Strange New Worlds, I go back to that. The reason why the fourth season hit a lot of fans in the fields was because it felt like the first thing that we got from Kurtzman, it felt like Star Trek. It looked like Star Trek. You know what I mean? But everything that else he's done doesn't have that feeling of being Star Trek. I mean, Discovery, I've tried to watch that multiple times. I don't even know how that show is popular with anybody. It's an abomination. I don't get it. I really don't. And the people at Paramount as well, whoever owns the rights to fucking, because it's complicated now, whoever owns the rights to Star Trek needs to get their heads out of the ass.
No, it's not complicated anymore, Noel. That was resolved. It was complicated for a long time when CBS and Paramount under Viacom were two separate entities, and Paramount owned the rights to the movies. CBS owned the rights to the TV series,
right?
And it was, but that was resolved when the new Viacom was formed in 2019. So the rights have been together basically in one spot since the second season of Star Trek Discovery. Right now, they can't use the rights thing as an excuse because they have rights to everything involved with Star Trek. It's just sheer incompetence and not understanding your source material and enabling idiots.
Kurtzman is the wrong. It's like with Doctor Who as well today. You've just got the wrong people in the jobs now. I mean, as I said, with RTD coming back in 2000, bringing the show in 2004, well, announcing it, and then it came out in 2005. It worked back then, but now fans are actually craving science fiction. They want, their Doctor Who to resemble Doctor Who. They want their Star Trek to resemble Star Trek, Star Wars. There's actually fans crying out there. See, these people don't understand. We're all waiting for you to make something that we go, wow. Right, and you did it with Picard. See, the last season of Picard, you proved that you could do it, right? And the same with the fourth season of Strange New Worlds. They show that if they actually put their minds to it, they can do it. But for some weird reason, they say, "Yeah, well, we gave them that little bit. Now let's go and do what we've been doing all along." Like they had an opportunity to hear after Picard ended, to capitalize on the fact that what's her face that plays Seven of, I forget her name. Sorry,
Jerry Ryan.
Yeah, Jerry Ryan. Right, everybody was craving for legacy. Right, come on, let's do it. Give Terry the reins and let's fucking do it. And then all of a sudden, it just died.
No, we're not seeing Metalis because Kurtzman hates him. And there was a comment in the chat, which is true. Metalis knows that Kurtzman is a complete hack because he had to work with him. And that's why you never saw him again after that. And I think that's also why Strange New World Season 2 went the way it did as kind of a revenge. But I think there's a difference between the chances of Star Trek coming back and the chances of Doctor Who coming back. And it's I will use the term incestuous in terms of Doctor Who, where there is that it's a handful of elitist people that control everything from the audio to what's on TV to what's in the fandom. Star Trek has never really been like that, even though, yes, it's been under the control of a hack for, 8-9 years now. But I think largely because it's an American show, just that type of again, I'll use the word, sorry, Dan, incestuous mentality doesn't really.
No, I agree with you completely.
In American entertainment, you do have the Hollywood elite, but I think the franchises are so vast, and the franchise and the fandom for an American show is always going to be significantly larger than the fandom for a British show, just by terms of population size. Mm-hmm. Where you're centralized on your little island in the UK. Yeah. Whereas something like Star Trek or Star Wars, it's a world series. So there might be some issues in terms of the running, but in terms of the fandom, in terms of everything else, it's just too broad for that level of control to exist. Like you could not cancel Star Trek fans the way the elitists in Doctor Who. You can't choose who is and who is not a Star Trek fan the way they can do in Doctor Who, because the way the fandom works. And this is why I will never come back, and a lot of other people will never come back, because I don't want to be a part of your incestuous bullshit. I think it's pathetic. I think it's disgusting. I think it's laughable. I don't think Doctor Who ever deserves to come back. I don't want to see it come back.
It's debilitating to people's well-being. I don't want to use the phrase mental health, but I think it's certainly detrimental to people's holistic well-being.
I do think it affects people's mental health, though. Listen. I'm gonna say something here. I've struggled personally with the decline of Doctor Who. I've found it hard to come to terms with it, if I'm honest, and I have let it get to me. I know I understand what Chris is saying in terms that he wants it gone, but I know for me, and I know a lot of fans will celebrate the day that it's canned because it'll be protecting it and stuff like. But I'll actually be good. I'll actually be fucking inconsolable. This show, I've said this. This is why I'm so connected to Doctor. This show saved my life. RTD saved my life. Right? I might hate the man now, but I can openly say if he didn't bring back Doctor Who in 2005, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you guys, ranting and moaning about whatever I'm ranting and moaning about. He saved my life. So when this show does go off air, I am going to be devastated. It is going to affect me. I can honestly say it will affect my mental health, because it has. It has. I know it sounds stupid to have
seeing
this
something damaged as well, though. Seeing something damaged and publicly made a spectacle of, being torn apart, and then have us as a collective. I mean, all of us in the fan base set against one another. In some ways, that's worse though than the show itself vanishing. It's a pity that one will inevitably eventually lead to the other unless it's addressed. But I think that in many ways it's kind of worse when something is dragged through them. The distinction that Chris has made between Trek fandom and Who fandom is really it's just it's running through my head now. But you're switching on all kinds of lights that I never even thought of before, because it does work differently, and I've never really sat and considered as to why, but it does.
Well, I have firsthand experience, because remember, I haven't really done it in years because I checked out during Discovery Season 3, but I was covering Doctor Who and Star Trek Discovery simultaneously for a couple of years. The Doctor Who videos had higher view, but I was still in probably 25 to 50,000 on average views with my Star Trek videos. The nutcases in Star Trek were always in the minority. There were some crazy people out there. But in terms of like and anybody that's covered both franchises, this will tell you the grief that they got from Star Trek fans was minuscule compared to, I don't even think vile begins to describe what it was like coming from the Doctor Who fan base. And also, if you'll remember, I changed my style completely about partway through season 2. And there was a reason I did that. If you watch my early 13th Doctor videos, I was mainly presenting them in sort of a monotoned voiceover style. I was trying to maintain a balanced view, and then sure everybody knows at one point then I just had it, and that's when I became the yelling psycho that everybody knows now, because I'm like, they're gonna call me these things. There came a point where I don't give a shit anymore, and that's where Angry Screaming Bulls Trek was born. But
I remember that very first video. It was fucking epic, I have to say, because he is right. He was very monotone when he was doing these videos on it, and then all of a sudden, just out of the blue, there was just this explosion of emotion and but that's what it did do, and that's what I'm saying. I do think, Dan, in some ways, for some of us at least anyway, it does have that impact on mental health. It does, change your perception of things and the way you think of things. And then, I'm still trying. I still, to this day, I'm trying to understand why they would go and do what they've done to Doctor Who when you've got probably the greatest IP out there. Think about it. It is probably up there because you've got a main character that can regenerate. There's not many shows that can do that.
The reason behind it, really, and the difference, I think, the difference in Chris's experiences as well, all hankers from the fact that you've got, on one hand, you've got a show, a franchise that is made, managed, and profiteered from, Gary, by a studio, by a money-making business, a conventional business that's run by a succession of people. You know, if people aren't working, if they aren't delivering, they get shipped out, and that's that. Whereas up until recently, in the involvement more of independence, which it still is to a certain extent, Doctor Who was something that was founded, owned, ran, publicised by an institution, for want of a better phrase. And I think that's the difference.
Well, the thing with one of the big differences I see is that with Doctor Who, yes, there's different doctors, but it's all one continuity. With Trek, it's much easier for you to kind of section off show by show whether or not you want to follow it, whether you want to skip it and come back to it later, whatever. So like for me, the real Trek is from 1966 through 2005, the end of Enterprise. Plus Star Trek Continues, because I consider that canon.
I recently watched that
canon. But things like Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, whatever, you can section it off show by show and disregard it, but it doesn't kind of pollute the entire franchise. Exactly. You know, unless you choose to be continually just kind of, you know, offended at your core by what they're doing. Yeah. And for me, there's some of that too. It's like they plunge the knife in. Now it's just every new thing Kurtzman does is just twisting the knife, but you can section it off show by show. Like what they're doing with, you know, Discovery didn't make me love Deep Space Nine any less, or the original series, because I consider them like separate things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same, like with real Star Trek, like the fact that I watched it the whole time it was on, but I don't like Voyager, but that doesn't make me any less of a Star Trek fan because I love the other 4 original series.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think Noel, with Doctor Who, there is a way that you can section it off, which ends with the classic series or the 96 movie. And that's your only sectioning off point. Like this is what they've done with Doctor Who. And I think they're too up their own asses to realize what they've done. But what they're doing now is worse than what happened during Whittaker, because you could argue it was a different showrunner. It was a different doctor. But what RTD has done is he's brought back, like he brought David Tennant back into it just to make fun of him. What RTD has done is he's destroyed retroactively, at least from my view. I know some people view it differently, but I think he's destroyed retroactively all of New Who. So, and New Who is now 20 years old. So that's 20 years of a show. Like the original series only lasted 6 years longer than New Who has now. So it's quite a feat to actually completely destroy 2 decades worth of material. But that's where I am. And I can understand Noel's perspective too. I think it's because I've been out of Doctor Who for so long right now. I've my other hobbies were Star Trek, and obviously Chris, horror was my other love. But
where do you think this lines up with Star Wars fandom? Is Star Wars still largely, and this is no offense to anybody out there watching, because I do love Star Wars, is Star Wars largely literally for children? And that's why we don't. I know there are some Star Wars fans who are very
Star Wars. The interesting thing between Star Trek, Star Wars, and Doctor Who is the destruction of all 3, even though it happened around the same time. They were all destroyed. Like wokeness is the at the heart of it, but they were destroyed in completely different ways. I think Star Wars, Doctor Who and Star Trek were both very, very long-running shows with hundreds of episodes with both of them. Star Wars, before Disney bought it, you had 6 movies, only 4 of which were actually really good. So I think, the attachment to Star Wars for most people now is the original trilogy. I think maybe for younger people, the sequel trilogy. And I think it rests at that. I think it's more or less because it was such a very small thing, but it's forever entwined in your youth.
But when people when people talk about it, I think it's different with Doctor Who. Yeah, we've got childhood memories and things like that. We say, like Noel said, I first saw Pyramids of Mars. And I think that Trek has that to a lesser extent, but it's far more so with, it seems to me, with Star Wars, that kind of misty-eyed lightsaber fights in your back garden kind of thing.
I think that may have been the case up until a few years ago. I think a lot of people have even been turned off for that. But the problem with Star Wars, and I think in some ways that's the most fascinating out of the three of them because of how badly and how incompetently it was run. You had the biggest IP. In 2015, like they had two movies that everybody loved. They had the Force Awakens and Rogue One. So both two great movies, but that's it. Rogue One. So but then to see how spectacularly it went off the rails with The Last Jedi, I'm like, subvert expectations. No, you did it to piss off the fans because you're a basketball-shaped dumbass. And Kathleen Kennedy does not like men, so that didn't help things. But
I would argue that The Force Awakens was a crap. It was actually crap.
I think it is. Retroactively, it was. I think when we first saw it,
because if you look at it, if you analyze it, it was just a rehash of A New Hope, just with jazzed up.
There was a lot
of. Quite honest with you, the only thing that Disney have done Star Wars wise that's good is Rogue One. Everything else has been shit. Yeah, in my opinion.
Well, I think The Force Awakens, Noel, I think it's similar to The Phantom Menace, where there was so much hype behind it because this is such a loved franchise. And, I saw Phantom Menace opening weekend in 1999. And 16 years later, I saw The Force Awakens opening weekend in 2015. I think in the case of both of them, there's what I call the Star Wars syndrome. I actually did a video about this years ago, relating it to Doctor Who. But I think it's The Phantom Menace and The Force Awakens. The hype behind it blinded us to what we were actually seeing on screen.
Yep.
And I think it was even on its own, I think The Phantom Menace is probably more unwatchable because there's just so much cringe in that movie. It's just absolutely awful. But it took a couple years for people, and even myself, to realize how bad Phantom Menace was because we just didn't want to accept it. And I don't think we realized how bad The Force Awakens was until 2 years later when The Last Jedi came in. Because I remember going back after The Last Jedi came out, and I'm like, well, this is terrible. Okay, was the first movie that bad? I couldn't even finish it. I'm like,
yeah,
this is
but Chris,
really boring.
when for The Force Awakens, whoever at Lucasfilm or whoever, Disney, whenever they read the first draft of the script and they saw that there was not a scene between Luke, Leia, and Han, they should have thrown it back and said, try again.
Yep.
That was always the indicator that movie was going to be terrible.
And I think part of the denial, too, was I think a lot of us thought that was going to happen in some way in the second movie. Force Ghost, Han Solo, I have no idea. But yeah, it was a wasted opportunity, and obviously Carrie Fisher has been gone for almost 9 years now, so that's a wasted opportunity. But Star Wars, I think, like, it wasn't the movies that killed Star Wars, even though the sequel trilogy is terrible. It's the absolute crap that it's actually a curiosity as to how bad Disney Star Wars on the streaming services actually been. Like, I haven't watched anything on screen since 2022, since I canceled my subscription. But it seems to have been, it got worse and worse. I remember the last one I watched was Andor. Actually, I watched that because Dan, we were doing a show. I watched the first 3 episodes. I'd never been so bored in my life. But like, how do you get to The Acolyte? How does that get greenlit? How does that end up on TV? And one thing, actually, I remember Dan last week when we were talking about Z with Disney. The argument as to how Disney, not everything Disney has made has been crap. I would say yes and no. I would say pre-2020 Disney, there was a lot of good stuff, like MCU, before they destroyed it. I love the dark Disney of the 80s. Anybody who grew up with it, but I think that's what turned us all into horror fans. But I think it can be argued that since 2020, and if I'm looking at this objectively, I don't think Disney has come out with anything that isn't complete crap. They've destroyed Star Wars. The first 2 Mandalorian seasons, those were early 2020. That you could argue maybe that was the last thing they put out that wasn't complete trash.
Everything they've had that, in my view, has been of any kind of worth or entertainment value has been, if not an accident, then something that's come out of almost like left of field. All their high-profile stuff, I agree, has been pretty awful.
It's there might be
wasn't the Mandalorian, but wasn't the Mandalorian
It was a high-profile show, yes, to be fair. But I still think that a lot of people, I think a lot of people had, no matter how much of a fanfare they sort of gave it, there wasn't a huge amount of appetite for it.
It's well, it is, and I know one thing that we're going to be doing in a few weeks. I'll let you know right now. Sort of a thing that's become a curiosity to me is what I'm calling the lost era of films and really entertainment as well. But there's an era from 2009 through about 2015, 2016 that was stopped dead in its tracks by the woke crap. And I looked at multiple genres and they all just were just kneecapped and decapitated at the exact same time, some varying things, but it's almost like a genre of film, of entertainment that doesn't seem like it was just a decade ago. Now it seems like stylistically 3 or 4 decades ago because it's so far removed from what we're getting right now. But what I find curious now, and I think, realistically, the woke era is about 10 years old now. We're coming to the end of it. But I never in my wildest dreams would have thought it would have gone to if somebody came to me in 2014 and told me in 11 years, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Marvel, well, I probably could have guessed DC at that point. But
Marvel was the big shocker.
Would be completely dead. How do you kill Marvel? How do you kill Star Wars? I'm like, yeah, Doctor Who has,
as all of this stuff started to fall, Chris, between that sort of 2017, 2019, 2020 kind of, as everything started to fall, people were saying, and I know a lot of people are really into the MCU, really ridiculously into the MCU, and their narrative was always, at least we've still got the Marvel movies. They're not going to mess them up. They're not going to touch those, are they? Because obviously it was so clearly a male-orientated brand. It was a lads and dads brand. There's no way they're going to kill that golden goose.
And they
did. When they did.
Dan, I remember, and I've said this on streams back around 2019. Even with you 3 gentlemen on the streams, we're talking when we were talking 6 years ago now. I remember at that point we were talking about everything's gone to crap, and there were 2 things that I highlighted. One was Marvel, because at that point we thought maybe Captain Marvel would just be a misstep because in 2019 we had so much hype for Endgame. The other one that I pointed out was horror, which hadn't gone woke. Then that Christmas we got Black Christmas, which is when the entire horror genre went to complete shit. And it's, there is some... A24 still produces some good stuff. Neon, there's some smaller independent stuff. But mainstream horror, Blumhouse, Jesus Christ. I'm like, the Insidious franchise went woke. How the fuck do you manage that? And I don't know if you've seen the 5th Insidious movie, but I saw it. There is a whole toxic masculinity college dorm side story in that doesn't need to be there. I'm like, horror, it's largely, there's a lot of stuff on streaming, and they've tried this new woke teen horror genre, which is a fucking nightmare. I'm like, horror went woke. How does that happen? Well, we know how it happens. People are idiots. But thank God we have A24. And one thing that was funny, they came out with a movie a few years ago called Men, which I think was just a big troll because everybody saw, I'm like, oh, this is going to be toxic. I'm like, no, actually, it's one of the most batshit things I've ever watched. Like, this thing is nuts. I actually
that
encourage everybody
reminds me
to
of
watch
the Kevin Bacon movie. Do you remember the Kevin Bacon is in a movie where all the characters are either trans, have pronouns or whatever, and he goes around killing them all or something. I forget what the name of it was. I think it was called Them or something like that.
Yes.
It was with Kevin Bacon.
Them. It's
it was
also,
absolutely
the Evil Dead movie that they came out with a few years ago, which wasn't terrible, but it had a trans character, and I'm like, why is this here? There was another one called what was it, The Hand or something like that. It was a possession movie. Again, just random trans character. Then last year I watched something that looked really interesting. It was called I Saw the TV Glow. I picked up the Blu-ray because it looked interesting. The entire movie was a trans allegory. I'm like, no, just
what I'm going to do, since we've found our way to Marvel, and because this story won't keep, I can't mothball this for another stream. I can't save this for another time. Let's talk a little bit about this, and because I think that if we want to see the end result, the final stop on the road to absolute desperation, we've probably just seen it.
Do you have a party trick?
This is quite difficult. It's about how the Beatles live in your mouth in different places. So John lives at the back, Paul lives at the top, Ringo lives at the front, and George lives... No, hang on. It was in terms of doing Beatles impressions. So when you want to do John, you talk like this, it's sort of up there. But when you do Paul, it's up there like that, it's sort of much more. And then when you do George, it's sort of over here. And Ringo's right at the front like that, you see. So that was my 4 Beatles in your mouth trick, which I will occasionally do.
Before we go ahead, just one quick thing I want to answer. So how's horror gone woke? No, the final girl trope is one of the things that made horror, Peter. What I'm saying is how it went woke is the things that it's including. With Black Christmas, which is one of the most notorious woke disasters brought to us by Blumhouse, where it's all about toxic masculinity, things like that. The whole killer became basically an embodiment of toxic masculinity. They even tried doing that with Halloween. So no, it's not the final girl trope, which is, a mainstay of horror. So it's not that. It's the things that they started including that did not need to be included for woke purposes. Like, again, that whole subplot in the final Insidious movie of the college, or something like Truth or Dare, which was not a very good movie, but a lot of people pointed this out, where there's a whole subplot that did not need to be there about a toxic womanizing doctor. So it's not the final girl trope. That's not wokeness. That's that's just what horror is. It's
Chris, did you ever see? I know it's not. Did you ever see a film? I know it's not horror, but it's a thriller, and it shocked me because it was similar. There was a film made of the stage play The Girl on the Train.
Yeah, I saw it.
So I don't know if the play was as bad, or maybe the success of that play and the book and the subsequent film is that one of the reasons to blame. Did that infect horror? Because that is just all about toxic masculinity, and you could see through it within 15 minutes of it. It was a well-made film, but
there's a difference in that one though. I can't remember the main character's name, the woman that is on the train. The character itself wasn't a Mary Sue. She was an alcoholic. She was very flawed. Her life is a disaster, at least in the movie, from what I remember. They don't shy away from that. So it wasn't. You had a lot more of the Mary Sue-isms in modern horror. There's also there was a trend a couple years ago, and there's several movies where a woke millennial goes back to one went back to 2003, one went back to the 80s. I think another one went back to the 90s, where it's basically like Back to the Future does horror, where there's some kind of horror element, but they're going back in time. They're getting offended by everything in the 80s. They're getting offended by everything in the 90s. They're getting offended by everything in 2003. So it's stuff like that. It's basically just making fun of us old people and calling us old toxic. So I think it was definitely. I think the stage play was probably worse than the movie. Also, that was, I think, 2017, so sort of right at the beginning of the woke disaster. So there is toxic masculinity in there, but I will give it credit because the main character was flawed. Where if that had come out in, say, 2022, the main character would have been perfect.
Yeah, I see. I see exactly what you mean now. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Oh, Olivia Hussey was in the original Black Christmas. Black Christmas, the original. Came out in
Passed away recently, didn't she?
Also directed, earlier this year. Actually, the original Black Christmas from '74 is actually directed by the same director of A Christmas Story, believe that or not. There was a terrible but not woke remake in 2006, starring the late Michelle Trachtenberg. No, the one that I'm talking about, they did it again in 2019. This was when most people believe horror officially went woke. Blumhouse put it out as the remake, and it was in terms of woke nightmares, it might be one of the worst movies you will ever see. It is, and you're actually rooting for the killers, who, of course, spoilers, all turn out to be a toxic man cult. But the characters in it are some of the most insufferable people you've ever seen. There's actually there's a video. If you know Nostalgia Critic or Cinema Snob, I know some people do, some people don't.
I have started following them there.
Played with they did play with wokeness around 2015, 2016. Seeing the response, they dropped it right away. But there's actually a video that they made on the Cinema Snob channel a few years ago covering Black Christmas 2019. I think it's one of his highest viewed videos, actually, where it's basically the two of them make it clear that they're not woke, but also they cover that movie in detail. If you want to see how bad it is, I recommend checking out that video. And that's when a flurry of really bad woke movies came in. But again, horror didn't go completely. A24 is too weird to go woke. There might be the occasional movie that kind of trends in that direction, but for the most part, they're weird, which is awesome. And they got canceled, unfortunately, because Rachel Zegler was in one of their movies, which flopped earlier this year, but they filmed it before they found out who she was.
Slow Latina and the 7 CGI dwarfs.
And I completely derailed it again.
Did you hear it was the #1 movie in the world? Not anymore.
About Marvel.
Yeah, back to
Dan, and I didn't mean to derail
I want to bash Robert Downey Jr. Come on.
Yeah, I did want to talk about this.
The
figure of desperation. I stopped caring about Marvel a long time ago, particularly on the big screen. Here we are with a new Avengers film about to begin filming. I think they're very keen on talking about that quite a lot at Marvel Studios. I think they should be focusing on the Fantastic Four and making that fit for purpose. And they probably should have closed down everything else, but that's a subject for another time. So they announced Robert Downey Jr. would lead Avengers Doomsday about 7 months ago now at San Diego Comic-Con in this stunt, which, to be fair, I thought this was very well managed and timed. The only problem was the announcement of Robert Downey Jr. as playing Dr. Doom, for me, dropped like a stone. I'd see no hype in this. To me, the stage of inspiration coming off this was bad enough. No.
But the reason why it did drop off is because he said he was never going to come back. And now they've thrown a load of money at him to come back because the Marvel franchise or the Marvel IP is dying. And the reason why it is dying is because if you look at the recent movies that they've made over after, Infinity War. No, what was the last one? Endgame. After Endgame, Marvel just completely lost the plot. And, some will argue that even Endgame was the start of the decline of Marvel. But for me personally, this is where I stand on it. I actually think that Marvel and DC right now I think it's stagnated. I think what's happened as well, I think people are sick of
I think I'm going to talk about the DC. I think we're going to talk about the DC stuff another time because I think it's a little more complicated.
But with Marvel, I would just say it's all feeling a bit tired and old now. There's nothing new here now for fans. to get excited about.
In
And
many
Robert
respects,
Downey
Noel,
Jr.
the
coming back for me is an indicator that this what?
In many respects, I have to try and keep this on track. In many respects, I think that the wisest thing that they did was probably the final thing they could have done, and that was to deliver that Deadpool and Wolverine film. That did really well for them last year, and they probably should have left it there for a couple of years, if truth be told. Let people wash that down rather than, I can see why they've gone to the Fantastic Four, but they probably should have left it another year or two for that by following it with this enormous Avengers film, and Avengers itself coming with so much weight of expectation off the back of what was it, Infinity War and then Endgame. They're playing with fire here, and to promote it with a 5.5-hour live stream led by Robert Downey Jr. last Wednesday. I mean, they built this as being an unmissable event. I bet this was a separate payday for the guy. I bet it wasn't built into his initial contract.
It's desperation.
Well, let's not forget, this movie was originally supposed to be the Kang Dynasty before the whole Jonathan Majors debacle.
Yeah.
And everything since then has been desperate scrambling to try to come up with something to, redeem the last 6-7 movies, which have all died. And
so do you think, Gary, that the script why they've done this and why they went to Downey Jr. in desperation is that the script for Doomsday is probably pretty close to the script to the Kang Dynasty. They wanted to simply swap one character in for the other with as much ease as they possibly could, without having to spend months rewriting a script, which had probably been rewritten already.
Well, that could be. The thing about it is, though, I mean, from what I know of what they've said is the plot is, and I think it's going to be like another 2-parter, it's basically just a straight lift from the Secret Wars mini from about 10 years ago, where all of the alternate worlds, and I can't believe that they're still putting all their chips on the whole multiverse thing when all the last half dozen movies have shown the audiences do not care about the multiverse. But now it's going to be a thing where all these multiple worlds are in this thing where they've got to defend their own world by defeating worlds, or else their world's going to get killed or blow up or whatever. So it's going to be heroes versus heroes and all this, which is how you can have the X-Men come back and the Fantastic.
Because I never read the Noughties Secret Wars series. For me, the Secret Wars is the one with the Beyonder and Battle World in the 80s. But
exactly. Me too.
This further one obviously does line up with this. They've retroactively termed the last couple of phases. They've grouped them all together, haven't they? And they've given them that overall title of the Multiverse Saga. And sure enough, that is where they're going with this. So they revealed the identities of some of the cast. I don't believe it's going to be all. Some of the cast of this film with this stunt, whereby they'd simply focus. There was no voiceover, no music, no nothing. Just the back of a chair, and one by one, every 10 or 12 minutes, it would move along the line, and a new name of an actor that was going to appear, actor or actress who was going to appear in Avengers Doomsday was revealed, such as Pedro Pascal, who we all can't wait to see in this, obviously. And people, now, to be fair, this was apparently watched by 275 million views whilst it was taking place. I mean, I find that extraordinary.
And that to me is, I mean, it strikes me, and I don't want to sound like high-minded when I say this, but I mean, to me, this was just an extraordinarily cynical marketing move, because they're basically saying, it doesn't even matter what kind of story we're going to give you. All you have to worry about, they're banking on the fanboys, going into like full-on squee mode with, all these 27 names. And I guarantee you there's going to be more. This isn't all of them. The reason there's probably not more is probably because they're still signing people. So there's going to be more, but unless this thing is going to be like a 7-hour movie, I mean, everybody's going to be getting like, 2 minutes of, screen time in all this, because you're going to have all these worlds against one of the other ones so that their world doesn't get destroyed. I think probably what it's going to end on is, I think it'll all lead to kind of an ultimate like soft reboot for the whole franchise as they kind of take the pieces of whichever worlds are left, and then that's the new universe going forward. But I think they're counting on the audiences wanting to plunk down their money because it's just they're getting like 55 stars, but there's no way a script like that is going to be able to do justice to all these.
No, but Gary, very interestingly enough, RDJ has a lot of pull.
I think this is
like,
he's getting $100 million for this. He was a producer
a producer on the two previous Russo brothers Avengers films, I think.
Well, I think this is delusional, and it's almost laughable. And I think everybody is going to be in this who's ever been in a Marvel movie, because nobody's going to turn down that paycheck, because none of them have really had careers since Marvel. I'm talking about those that have left. But I think this is completely and hilariously delusional. These people seem to think it's still 2019. 2019 was 6 years ago. Say had this happened, I don't know, maybe in 2021, maybe. But nobody cares about this anymore. People have moved on. Robert Downey Jr. has not had a career since he left Marvel. He did his Doolittle movie that flopped and a few other things. I don't.
No, he did Oppenheimer as well. Now, in fairness, Robert Downey Jr. has actually done,
but he wasn't. I'm talking about movies where he was the main draw, like the big marquee name.
Okay.
Because Oppenheimer, there were many actors in that movie, but I think the big star of that was actually Christopher Nolan, and I can never remember his name, but the guy that played Oppenheimer. But you can't really argue that Robert Downey Jr. has the pull now that he had in 2019. Also doesn't help that he seems to have aged 15 years in the last 5. Like, he was, he looked young and muscular and whatever during Endgame. He looks like an old man now. Yeah. So there's a lot of baggage attached to this. There's the separation of 6 years. There's what's happened to Marvel in the meantime. There's that ad that they put out during the Kamala Harris campaign, which has since become infamous, which I think permanently damaged the reputation of everybody that was involved in it, including Robert Downey Jr.
And maybe even harmed the earlier films as well, Chris.
It's because Marvel's still going on. It's time will tell. I think there's already some nostalgia maybe linked with those earlier films, because I think Marvel, there's a very clear cutting off point between 2019 and 2020 where it becomes something completely different with only a handful of the original elements left. But I think even if Marvel hadn't gone woke, 6 years in modern culture is 30 years in the 20th century. I think the kids that grew up with Marvel have moved on. Maybe they've got families, they're into some other things. I think a lot of the young men who were boys when the early Marvel movies came out, or when the first Avengers movie came out in 2012, they're probably in their late 20s now, and that is the fastest red pill generation in history. So I guarantee they are turned off Marvel. I don't know who this is for. They were chasing an audience that never existed. And even this, I don't think it really has nostalgia working for it, because I think in order to be nostalgic for something, it has to go away for a bit. And Marvel didn't went away. It didn't go away. We've just seen it sort of diminish and shrivel into the shrunken raisin of sadness it is now.
All I know is that if Captain Marvel and She-Hulk aren't in this, I'm not interested.
I guarantee they'll be in there.
They'll be in there eventually. There'll be a second round of names, maybe even a third as well. We're looking down at the list of names that were revealed for this. There's people like Vanessa Kirby, who I'm quite keen to see what she does as Sue Storm. I like the actress, and she's interesting enough casting. And there's a couple of other people you think, oh, that's quite cool. But when you get further and further down, it met with immense cynicism when I see that they've got Kelsey Grammer back as the Beast from the Fox X-Men movies. I love I love those films. But when you see a list of the cast of, for example, Thunderbolts, which hasn't even been released yet, so they're anticipating that will be a hit because they're forming a big part of the cast of this. That's a big reach. So there's that. But they're also reaching back deeper into the X-Men movies by bringing back both Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen as Professor X and Magneto. Obviously, both very, very senior actors now. These are still my favourites of any kind of Marvel movies, particularly the first two films and First Class. You'd think that I would be chomping at the bit to see this, but I don't care.
Do you honestly think, Dan, that they're going to get more than 5 minutes in this movie?
No. That's why
I'm actually as soon as I saw that, because when Picard ended, and that was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, you could tell he was not well and he was very frail. It actually, because I think even though his personal views are atrocious, I think a lot of us still like to think of Patrick Stewart as, you know, the strong Captain Picard or Professor X, you know, back when he still had that booming voice, which is completely gone. And one of the things, you know, not even the woke element, but one of the things that was very hard to watch in Picard was how much he had deteriorated. And now we're looking at a few years after that. I almost feel bad. I'm like, guys, don't do this to him. Just, you know, let him retire.
Get James McAvoy in, by all means.
He's obviously doing it himself and receiving the paycheck. So on one hand, I get what you're saying, let him be and all of this, but he's willing to actually do it. He's willing to come back with Ian McKellen.
Yeah, there is
and do this.
The funny thing about Thunderbolts, Dan, that you mentioned, is that a lot of people, and this was pointed out almost immediately, they said when it got to the end of that line of 27 chairs, and they started thinking about the names of who wasn't there, they said, well, now they spoiled who survives the Thunderbolts movie and who doesn't based on who wasn't in this cast list. You know, so everybody goes, oh, okay, you just spoiled your own movie. So
there you go.
Gary, is that really a big thing? Because nobody's going to watch.
No, I don't care. It's funny that, like I said, that ties back to what I said before about how they think that just by having this roster of names is enough to convince the fans to come in. It doesn't matter about the script. Doesn't matter about anything. What is the budget of this thing?
$500 million.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to make what, like $2.5 billion to be
the equivalent of a national debt.
They're going to have to make over $2.5 billion to be profitable. Okay.
Not a chance in hell.
That's what I was going to say. Do you think this movie will make $1 billion? Do you think this movie will actually make $1 billion in the box office, or do you think it's going to be another flop? Because I think it's going to be a flop.
I think it's going to be a humiliation.
My instinct is, that it's going to be a drastic shock to the system for Marvel Studios. They still could they could still throw a couple of curveballs, which would bring people out there. I'm naming no names. Obviously, there could be some people who could curiosity.
You may as well get R. Kelly in as well. Well, you know.
But I'm thinking, in all seriousness, I noticed that Ryan Reynolds isn't listed. Neither is Hugh Jack. So they could go there. They could.
I don't think there's any mistake that this came out this week in order to counter the tidal wave of bad publicity that Disney has had over the last couple of weeks with the whole Snow White thing. And isn't it a coincidence that this comes out right now in order to change the narrative and try to get people excited for Disney?
Well said.
I don't think that's
it's true. It's
and Gary, I think it's worse. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think we should forgive Disney. Disney could have gone about that a different way. That may have helped us, may have not. But the best publicity move they could have done to say, we've changed, we're not like that anymore, would be to pull a David Zaslav and cancel Snow White, which in them financially would have been better in the long run because they would have been able to use it as a tax write-off, and it may have gotten enough goodwill where people might want to check out what they're doing forward. So it could have been a net positive. But Dan, I just see this being a disaster. And keep in mind, it's over a year before this comes out, which means By that point, we're going to be even further away, 7 years away from when anybody really cared about Marvel. I think this is going to be an epic train wreck. It reeks of desperation. What you should do is not try and blow your entire load on this. What you need to do, which is what they will never do, is you need to retire Marvel for, I'd say, a few years, preferably 5, then try something new. This is not going to help your case. This is going to make it much worse. This is Marvel's equivalent of when Doctor Who brought David Tennant back, thinking it was going to save it, and it made things worse. I think this is going to be Marvel's version of that. And there's a lot of characters in there from the woke movies. I think they're all there because they don't have careers elsewhere. So in 2026, I think the first one comes out in 2026. By that point, the woke era is almost certainly going to be long dead because it's already pretty much dead now. So this movie is still going to be taking that baggage with it. Like if you keep anything related to Black Panther or the Eternals or Shang-Chi or whatever his name was, those were the wokest of their woke movies, or Captain Marvel if she shows up. You got that baggage behind it too. A year from now, in a genre of film that not only was it never was, but it's now largely completely dead and a joke.
And where's the Guardians of the Galaxy in this lineup? There's not even.
I think Chris Pratt has been canceled.
You know, there've been 35 movies, Marvel movies now since the start of this. I think Thunderbolts is like the 35th or whatever, and it's like, you know, people talk about, you know, the fatigue and everything. It's like 35 movies of anything. It's like, you know, just rest it.
Oversaturation. Well, I think, Gary, also, that's one of the, outside of wokeness, oversaturation is one thing that's killed. Like, oversaturation is what killed Star Trek in 2005, because there was too much of it for too long, and too much of it during the first 2 seasons of Enterprise and all of Voyager, well, in my opinion, was just filler. So oversaturation will kill anything. And this has been, and there's one thing of being oversaturated with something that's good, but when, you know, Marvel was actually good, you know, 5 movies a year back then, we thought it was too much, but it's been 5 years of terrible movies, terrible to mediocre to awful movies, and TV series just bombarded with them. And not only that, they made all this crap interconnected, so you had to watch all these god-awful series to understand what was going on in the movie.
It's homework.
Early Marvel is much better than the Marvel that we have now. Early Marvel, those films back in the day were absolutely fantastic. I remember watching the first Captain America movie and being absolutely blown away what I was watching.
So who do you think 275 million is a lot of streams? Who do we think watched it?
Well, you have to look at that number as well. That stream was plastered everywhere. Every article that covered it had a link. A lot of them were embedded links, which would, and that's what they do. They'll look at this stream. The YouTube video starts playing automatically. So even if you click on the news article, that's a view.
Dan, was that consistent? The 213 million that you say, was that consistent, or did it, you know, up and down? Was that a consistent viewership all the way through this 5 hour or whatever video it was?
No, it's the autoplay when it starts, but also there were almost certainly bots involved in this, because even with all that play, there's no way, given Marvel's track record and viewership over the past years, that many people were interested in seeing this. So this has been inflated in multiple ways. There's no way that 2/3 of the population of the United States wanted to watch this stream about a long dead franchise that nobody really cares about.
Well, also remember the pattern. If people started clicking into the pattern pretty early, that it was going to be every 12 to 13 minutes was going to be a new name. Then you click away, you do other stuff, and then you click back every 12 minutes. So you don't have anybody sitting there. I really hope you don't have anybody sitting there staring at the screen for 5.5 hours. But you probably, so if I were to do that, then it would be 27 clicks from one person.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, you would want to have some dedication to watch it from start to finish without clicking onto anything else. And I do agree with you, Gary. I don't think that happened. I don't think people were just just watching. I think they were doing other stuff and then they'd come back to it. And Chris makes a good point about bots because on X there's a account, the master of the TDS, and he has exposed
I've seen him.
the Disney bots. And
I love that guy. Yeah,
I mean, seriously, he's brilliant. He's exposed Disney.
This is, I will still say, this is hilariously delusional. And these people are so far up their own asses in the way that they did this. They literally think it's still 2019 and they still think people care this much, which is a symptom of the Hollywood bubble. You are completely out of touch with regular people, and you don't know that most of the people that used to love your franchise, and I saw Infinity War and Endgame opening weekend. It was one of the biggest movie experiences I've ever participated in. They still think it's that time. They still think they have that level of relevance in society. So it's just this is delusional. It's delusional in terms of the way they've marketed it. It's definitely delusional in terms of the budget. I think Robert.
When do you think this franchise? When do you think this Avengers Doomsday? When was there possible that this could have worked, say, years ago when you were doing these Marvel movies?
Yeah, it could have. I think, say had Marvel not just, we're going to live in hypothetical happy land where the world didn't degenerate into complete shit for a decade. We'll just pretend that, say 2019 came and went, they did Endgame, and the second Spider-Man movie was kind of the coda to that, which was the last two Spider-Man movies. But say, Marvel had gone in a different direction and they gave us good stories, maybe new characters, something like that. I'm not a comic book obsessive like some people. So, but they could have done something interesting, not woke, good stories. I think had they gone that route, they never would have topped Endgame again, because that was a once in a century movie experience.
I actually thought Endgame was
right movie at the right time,
a lot bigger. And
Infinity War was better than Endgame.
They wasted 2 years with nonsense like Eternals and Love and Thunder and all that garbage. It's like it was just wasted time.
Yep. It wasted, and this is the same thing like we were saying with Star Trek Starfleet Academy. You can damage your brand to the point that you can cause severe damage to your brand, if not completely destroy your brand, because the thing that you want to do with that brand is obviously, well, in theory anyway, you want to make money and you want to have people pay to see your movie. So you can have a bad movie, but you can have, say, Marvel. Oh wait, oh no, I've seen those movies. All right,
can I ask you the question? Because these are the comic geeks, so I'm not. Do you think that the biggest Achilles heels of this whole MCU was the fact that they did try make all of these movies connect, like the Captain America, the Iron Man movies? If they had just kept them as separate entities, do you think people would be still invested now rather than, what I mean? It's very interesting, isn't it?
It got to a point where the only things that people were talking about were the connective tissues, not the films themselves.
Yeah.
I noticed that probably way before Infinity War, in fact. Probably around the time of the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, people it's as if they were only going for the post-credit sequences, and whatever came before them was inconsequential. And when it got to a point, they didn't sense that time coming. I saw it, other commentators, you probably saw it as well. A lot of us saw it and they should have pulled back from it. Okay, it's got to a certain point. It's outlived its purpose. It's now going to start debilitating the rest of our film, but they didn't see it. They didn't see it coming at all. And it's not the factor, but it hasn't helped at all. It's made it a lot harder to get the thing sort of kick-started, to retrieve it, to pull it out. So it's one of a number of things. Excess is what has killed the MCU. All manner of excess from lots of different quarters. We've got a release date on Avengers Doomsday, believe it or not. So it's just started filming. May the 1st, 2026. That's a year and a month away.
For God's sake, the world will be ended by then.
Well, who knows? Everything's gonna go to
Well, do you know what? It doesn't matter. If the world does end, we won't have to fucking watch it, will we? So, like...
well, we don't have to watch it anyway. I don't see myself watching this. I don't
know. I might give it a go because Robert Downey Jr. is in it. I know.
No,
I like him. So
I used to like him, not so much anymore. But I think what Dan was saying, I think you're right. There are two factors. So one is the early Marvel movies like Phase 1, 2, and 3. They were interconnected, but you're right. The movies, any of those films on their own, standed out as just a good film. It was almost like the interconnectivity was secondary. They were giving us good films. Yeah, I think the problem, Dan, not so much as just the quality and the interconnectivity, but they made it so overly complex starting in Phase 4, not only with the movies and the TV series, but also with this alternate universe, multiverse crap.
Yeah.
I don't even think they know what's going on at this point, and I can't be bothered.
It's one thing, Chris, to give a general audience 3 Spider-Men who they've seen before, but you start bringing in literally dozens of people, some of which they've never seen playing the parts before, and they just tune out if they don't understand what they're seeing, because to them it looks like an extended skit, and they're not. But how the general audience responds to that sort of stuff is bemusement, and they wonder why they're there in the first place. And they're certainly, even if they're not necessarily put off by seeing a further one because of that, it's going to make them feel like they weren't in on something, that they weren't seeing something that is made out like it should be obvious to them. And that's when they started losing people.
It's not only, Dan, you're totally right. It's not only that they don't understand what's going on. There's no stakes. If you have 5 Doctor Stranges, doesn't matter if 4 of them die. If you have 3 4s, it's like there's no stakes when you have multiple versions of all these heroes.
True.
Yeah, you could just bring anybody back. It's not. It would have been complicated enough on its own, but I still think Disney being able to buy Fox is the biggest crime in the history of entertainment. But not only did you brought in all the Fox stuff to further complicate things, but you only brought in half the Fox stuff. You're rebooting half the other Fox stuff.
Where's Famke Janssen?
It's like you took these two things, Marvel and Marvel Fox, and you threw it into a blender and came out with rainbow-colored vomit.
I think the same kind of philosophy has kind of infected the other stuff as well. I think in Star Trek, we see people in the 21st century Star Trek, we've seen multiple characters die and then get brought back from the dead. Whatever his name was, the husband of the Doctor, the guy who's always dressed in white, the black guy. Such an inconsequential character.
Oh, racist Ricky,
but he's not the only one. There's been several characters in that, and you think, and people get spirited away off to another place, and then they come back. And even on Doctor Who, you've got and I've never necessarily subscribed to this, but you've got a situation where we're watching the 15th Doctor run around on screen. If anything happens to him, not only do we know that he can regenerate into a new one, but we also know there's another Doctor running around too.
Yeah,
so it's a similar. It's the same thing. There's a spare. One Reed Richards gets killed off in whatever dozy film that was. We've got another one coming up played by somebody else.
That's why I hate prequels.
Where does Marvel though actually go from here when this movie?
They take a break.
Yeah.
Hopefully
flops. Like where do they go then?
Because they've made this all the same mistakes now. They're trying to repeat the successes of 6 years ago.
Yeah,
but they're actually falling into they're actually hitting all the same, making all the same long-term problems for themselves again. So they've learned absolutely nothing. It's about short-term profits. They're going to worry about tomorrow when the time comes, rather than make the sensible move. They're already bogging down Fantastic Four unnecessarily, and that movie could have really got them out of a hole. That is the right film to follow up Deadpool and Wolverine with, but not like this. Not lost in another sort of flurry of just drivel stuff that stars people that they don't care about, playing characters they've never heard of in premises that they can't relate to. It's more of the same.
Amen. Well, we got Thunderbolts in a month, so that's probably gonna be just like what you just said, Dan. That applies to Thunderbolts. Characters you don't know or care about, and they expect you to love. It's like, no.
Well, they learned that with Captain Marvel.
Oh, is it an arrogant? Do you think it's an arrogant?
Say what?
Say that again. Say it again, Noel.
Do you think it's an? I think it's an arrogance of whoever's running Marvel, like that. No matter what they do in their eyes, they can't do wrong, or they think people are just going to automatically lap it up because it has the Marvel name on it.
That
it's greed and it's pride, and not much else besides that. I think it's short-term thinking. There are no visionaries left there now. Kevin Feige was never a visionary anyway. In all truth, he made a couple of really wise decisions. He wasn't a visionary.
It's become niche for the fanboys too. Thunderbolts is a totally niche movie. It's not going to have the success Guardians did. Guardians was a fluke because they had a great director who went his own way, and it connected with audiences. And
also, Gary, it was conceived. It was conceived, even though it's under a Marvel brand that's existed for 50 years. It was conceived pretty much for the big screen by James Gunn. Again, I wouldn't describe James Gunn as a visionary.
No,
he's a great director and he's great with script.
Yeah, he's idiosyncratic and he's very motivated, and so it worked. Whereas with Thunderbolts, I think I said last week, Thunderbolts is a TV show that would make a great TV show, and yet they've put it on the big screen at a place where nobody's really going to care. They're not going to have time to get to know those characters in the way that they could and should. And yet the characters from that are making up a good chunk of the names that they announced in their silly 5.5-hour live stream the other day. Let us know if you sat through any of it.
Imagine doing that though, to have the arrogance. We're going to put a 5.5-hour stream on. We're going to just name each name of who's going to be in this movie. Every whatever minutes it was. I mean, it does scream fucking, and even the way he acted in the video, because obviously when I got to the lad and he's walking, I was like, what the, like, he's still walking around. He's this big cheese actor.
Robert Downey Jr. doesn't really know what's going on. I think that behind closed doors, he's probably still, after all this time, a little amazed and confused that, and I think he probably counts himself very, very lucky that he found himself in the eye of that storm. I think he's got no idea why the fans loved the things that they loved to the extent that they did. He's quite happy to take money.
I doubt he's even watched.
He was a great Iron Man.
I know I wouldn't. But
he was great in that role.
Well, I think, Dan,
I'm being honest with you, I loved him as Iron Man.
So did I.
Well, I think another thing you were saying, Dan, we were talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. Again, we're looking at a completely different time period. We're looking at 2014, when there was a lot of goodwill. Marvel was still, 6 years into it, but still relatively new. It was the biggest thing going at the time. Marvel had not made a misstep yet at that point, where DC had already made a couple missteps. So I think it was the goodwill. I'm like, this is Marvel. It's connected, but not connected to what we're seeing. We're going to check this out. The trailers looked awesome. A lot of that was a different time. This is, everything that Guardians of the Galaxy had working for it, something like Thunderbolts has working against it.
And I think they're really feeling something like this 27 chair thing really points out that it was a major mistake to kill off their best female character with Black Widow. Because now they have their replacement Black Widow, who nobody gives a crap about, when they could have had Scarlett Johansson in this lineup. Would have been great.
Bear in mind, people like Florence Pugh as an actress as well. She's very popular in her own right. But in that character, she's just a stand-in, just like Anthony Mackie, another great actor who they've foisted this part on. They put him on stage, get him to say stupid things he doesn't even believe in himself or probably even understand. And obviously they get the fat paycheck at the end of it. If you're still in for Marvel Studios stuff, let us know what you're looking forward to this year, to what extent, how much of the live stream did you suffer through. Not this one, theirs. Although results may vary. And yeah, because we're all ears for that too. Save the gingers, says Lord Thoth. We couldn't agree more. Of course, save the gingers. Save the gingers. And let us know further in the comment section. Yes, things have gone rather awry on this edition of the show, but we've had a good chat anyway, I think. Yeah, again. Let's take it here.
On your last trip, did you discover what the Earth people eat? They eat a great many of these. They peel them with their metal knives. Boil them for 20 of their minutes. Then they smash them all to bits. They are clearly a most primitive people. For mash, get smash.
In our own way, I think we've burnt up another week in geek pretty nicely. After all, everybody, thank you for your company here across Rumble and YouTube with the Spacebook live and my panel, the rabbi from another planet there. Hope he's nicely tucked up and dreaming about, well, I don't think we really want to know what he's dreaming about. I think we can probably have a good guess. So thank you, as always, to the rabbi and to the panelists as well. The one and only Bowls Trek, our mate Chris here. We've got Noel Glynn from the TARDIS Zone as well. We never did the introductions before, did we? Noel Glynn from the TARDIS Zone here as well, fighting the good fight over on social media and on YouTube as ever. Gary Akers here too, all capped off with the Batman cap. We've been talking about Marvel as well, and you've been subverting them the entire time. What would Feige have to say?
Man.
You've
be on the list.
Go DC here.
I prefer DC anyway. I've always preferred DC over Marvel anyway. But I will say this, I think the Marvel movies have been...
Noel is gone. Oh, one thing I wanted to say to the comments in the screen earlier, you're bringing up the example of Terrifier. Like I said, not all horror has gone woke. It's been the least impacted. But the cool thing about Terrifier and why it's awesome is Damien Leone refuses to work with the studios, and he's made himself a 8-figure multimillionaire in the process. So no, he has complete control of his movies, which is why Terrifier is awesome. And Terrifier 3 is one of the bloodiest things you will ever see. It's awesome. And you'll never see Santa or Christmas Time the same way again.
So is this guy who makes those movies, is he becoming a kind of like a John Waters kind of figure, or who's the guy who made the Monsters film a couple of years ago, Rob Zombie? Is he in that mold, or is he a bit more business minded than that, a bit more savvy? And
I'd say he's business savvy in the fact that he's kept his movies completely independent. The Terrifier 2, I think he made for like $200,000 or something like that, and it was brilliant. And it made tens of, I think, into the hundreds of millions eventually. I have to double check that.
I haven't watched any of those movies. Are they worth watching though?
Do you like blood?
Yes, of course I do. These are some of the most gruesome thing. Okay, you remember the franchise Saw? That's a cuddly teddy bear compared to these. So yeah, I love them. I think they're great. Oh, how's Frank doing? We don't know if Frank's in solitary. He's been Donkey Karen has taken over, and she's going to cancel all of us because we've been very bad today.
Yeah, it's. I think it's indefensible.
Yeah.
Thank you all
for
your company.
I'm gonna have to check them out. I've seen them, but I've never actually went in to watch them because obviously Cheryl doesn't like clowns. So I like to watch a good old horror the odd time. We watched the Emmy.
Okay, let me put it this way, Noel. Have you ever wanted to watch a naked clown wearing somebody else's face? That's in the first movie, and that's the tame of the three of them.
Right. Not really, but I wouldn't mind seeing it.
Right.
Actually, I think a watch along on those movies.
Have you ever seen a Christmas tree decorated with somebody's intestines? That's no.
Yeah, that was a Hallmark movie last year.
Yeah, that was the third movie. Oh, and it's not for the squeamish, but they're some of the best horror movies you will ever see.
What's the use in having extensive libraries and bros if you can't recommend movies and TV shows to one another to revolt us all at a later date? Thank you, as always, everybody, for your company there in the live chat on YouTube and Rumble, and everybody here on the panel. We'll be back again next time with even more out there from somewhere and sometime. But until then, enjoy the rest of your weekends. We'll catch you in the comments. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.